You know that feeling, don't you? You've spent years immersed in theory, poring over these dense texts, dissecting case studies,
Right.
and engaging in all those spirited debates about, the intricacies of the human psyche. You feel like you've got a pretty robust framework, a deep intellectual understanding.
Mm-hmm.
And then you step into the therapy room, the door closes, patient starts talking, and suddenly all that meticulously constructed theoretical scaffolding feels like it's just hit an invisible wall.
Yeah. A really solid yet somehow intangible wall.
Exactly. Your brain shifts from, okay, I know all about this, to something more urgent, you almost visceral, like, what do I do right now? How do I actually be here?
It's that moment, isn't it? Exhilarating sometimes, maybe
Yeah.
a bit terrifying other times.
Totally. It's when instinct seems to take over
Yeah.
and you find yourself acting, responding, just being in ways that weren't precisely mapped out in any syllabus. It's where your intellect kind of bumps right up against your intuition.
Precisely. And it's that profound, often unspoken, and deeply personal gap between what we learn conceptually, in the declarative sense, and what truly unfolds in the immediate, dynamic, and often, let's face it, kind of chaotic space of the therapeutic encounter.
Yeah, chaotic is a good word for it sometimes.
It is, and it demands a different kind of knowing, doesn't it? Something beyond just the textbook definitions.
And that, my friends, is exactly why we're taking a deep dive today into a truly insightful piece of work. M.A. Kagan's paper, Deliberation and Practice in Psychoanalytic Treatment.
A fantastic paper.
It really is. Now, for those of you who've been with us, we typically unpack a stack of sources, maybe compare different viewpoints. But today, we're focusing our lens, really zooming in on a single powerful text.
And the idea here isn't so much a lecture on the paper.
No, not at all.
Yeah.
Think of this more like a guided clinical seminar. Imagine we're sitting together in a quiet room, the paper open between us, just like we might in a supervision session. We're going to pause, unpack key bits, wonder aloud together.
Really try to feel into what Kagan is describing, connect it to that lived experience we were just talking about.
Exactly. So our mission today, as we collaboratively explore this text, is really to shine a light on a core tension Kagan highlights so brilliantly: the dynamic, often subtle interplay between conscious, deliberate thought.
The planning, the analyzing.
Right, and that spontaneous, intuitive action that just seems to happen in the therapeutic encounter.
Right.
We want to try and translate these sometimes complex psychoanalytic concepts into clear, practical insights.
Insights that resonate directly with your own clinical experience, hopefully helping you understand those moments when theory seems to give way to a deeper, maybe more embodied way of responding.
So before we even dive into the paper itself, just take a moment. Cast your mind back to your own clinical practice, maybe a session from this week, or perhaps one that still resonates from early in your career. Where have you felt that theoretical knowledge just hit a wall? When has instinct, undeniably taken over?
And when that shift happened, what did that spontaneous action actually feel like in your body, in your mind? Can you recall that sensation?
Yeah, try and hold on to that feeling, because
Good.
we're about to unpack why that happens, how it's actually a crucial, often indispensable part of the therapeutic process.
And what it implies for how we cultivate our own clinical presence, our own way of being in the room.
Okay, so let's start right where Kagan begins. He talks about what he calls the paradox of practice. This fascinating phenomenon where intuition, rather than our conscious thought, so often seems to lead the way in those really critical clinical moments.
Yeah, he opens with this central observation that, frankly, can be quite unsettling for a therapist fresh out of training, can't it?
Definitely.
Despite all the rigorous, extensive theoretical knowledge we acquire, there's this pervasive, often unacknowledged gap between that intellectual understanding and our actual moment-to-moment actions in the therapy room.
It's almost as if what we know intellectually, what we can articulate and plan out, it isn't always what truly guides our hands or our words or even just our presence when it really matters most.
And what's particularly compelling here, I think, is that Kagan isn't just speaking anecdotally. He's not just theorizing from an armchair.
Right, he grounds it.
He grounds this observation in direct evidence. He pulls from an early study back in 1977 that focused specifically on the self-observation of psychoanalytic practice.
So therapists looking at their own work.
Exactly. This wasn't just some casual survey. It was a structured, qualitative look into how experienced psychoanalysts actually operated during significant junctures in their sessions. They were asked to reflect on moments that felt pivotal, like turning points.
Okay, so what did this study find? It involved 20 practicing psychoanalysts, right?
Yeah.
Reflecting on their own clinical work.
Yes, and this is where it gets really interesting, and I think for many of us, potentially quite validating. The majority of these seasoned clinicians reported that their actions during critical turning points in sessions were overwhelmingly spontaneous and non-deliberative.
Wow. Okay, wait. The majority. So not just some, but most of them.
Most of them. In the crucial moments, think about that. Experienced professionals, arguably at the height of their skill, found themselves acting more from an intuitive gut sense than from some pre-planned, intellectually constructed strategy.
That really challenges that common misconception, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Especially for newer therapists, the idea that a purely rational, pre-planned approach is always the ideal or even achievable.
Absolutely. It suggests that maybe the most impactful moments often emerge from something else entirely, something less tangible, perhaps more deeply felt.
Which immediately raises a crucial question, one Kagan then really digs into.
Uh-huh.
What exactly do we mean by deliberation versus practice in this specific clinical context?
Right, and he is quite precise in his distinctions. It's important we understand them not just as definitions, but as descriptions of internal states, internal processes. So when we talk about deliberation, he's referring to conscious, thoughtful planning. This is the analytical processing we all learn and value.
The thinking part.
The thinking part, deliberately applying theoretical frameworks, forming interpretations based on learned knowledge, carefully weighing diagnostic considerations, maybe mentally rehearsing interventions.
Okay, I could picture that.
It's typically a slower process,
Right.
more sequential. It demands significant cognitive effort. Imagine sitting there, meticulously crafting an interpretation in your mind, maybe even wordsmithing it, weighing each nuance before you even think about saying it. That's deliberation in action.
So if you've ever found yourself listening to a patient, and a specific theory, maybe object relations, or a particular defense mechanism just pops into your head, and you start mentally constructing this brilliant, insightful interpretation, piecing together the evidence you've gathered, forming the perfect sentence in your head, that's what Kagan is pointing to as deliberation.
Exact. What would that feel like in the room for you, the listener? Perhaps a sense of focused mental effort, intellectual engagement, connecting the dots.
Yeah, that feeling of working it out in your head before you speak.
Right. Now, on the other side, we have practice. And Kagan is specifically talking about spontaneous intuitive action here.
Okay, so the doing part.
The doing part, but specifically the spontaneous doing. This covers immediate responses, the subtle nonverbal cues we offer, the timing of a simple phrase, maybe even the choice to hold silence with a certain quality. It's a kind of knowing how that doesn't necessarily involve conscious step-by-step processing or that same kind of intellectual effort.
So it feels different.
It feels different. It's often faster, more holistic, and feels more automatic, almost like it emerges from within you without a direct conscious command, like a flow state maybe, an embodied response.
So how do you really know when you're thinking versus doing in a moment like that? What does that spontaneous action feel like? Is it a gut feeling? A sudden urge?
It could be a sudden impulse to shift your body, perhaps, to lean in, or maybe just say a few words, even if you hadn't planned them or fully understood why you said them until later.
Yeah.
And Kagan even places this distinction within a broader philosophical context, mentioning thinkers like Thomas Kuhn, who argued that practice in any field, even hard science, isn't solely guided by explicit theory.
Interesting.
It's deeply rooted in implicit embodied knowledge, a kind of knowing that resides, in your very bones, not just your brain. It's that feeling of just knowing what to do without being able to trace the intellectual steps that got you there.
Okay, and if we connect this back to the hard data from that study.
Yes, the paper gives us a truly striking statistic. It drives this point home with undeniable force.
What was it again?
Out of 53 significant moments in therapy, these were moments identified and rigorously analyzed by those experienced clinicians. A staggering 41 of them involved spontaneous, non-deliberative actions from the therapist.
41 out of 53.
41 out of 53.
Wow. That's huge. That's not marginal at all.
Not at all. It profoundly underscores just how prevalent and implicitly how effective this intuitive mode is in actual moment-to-moment clinical work. It really shifts our perspective on what constitutes expertise, doesn't it?
It really does. 41 out of 53. It hammers home that this isn't about, throwing theory out the window. Not at all.
Quite the opposite.
Right. It's about recognizing that in the crucible of the therapeutic relationship, there's this powerful, almost essential role for what happens when conscious, explicit theory kind of gives way to something else in the moment.
Something more immediate, more responsive.
Yeah, honoring that immediate, responsive of a nonverbal part of ourselves.
Yeah.
It forces us to ask, if so much of the impactful work happens intuitively, almost automatically, then how do we genuinely understand, and maybe more importantly, cultivate that capacity within ourselves as clinicians?
Mm-hmm.
It really challenges us to look beyond the textbook and into the actual lived experience of practice.
Absolutely. So if these impactful moments so often involve this spontaneous, non-deliberative action, it just begs the question, what kind of knowing is actually at play here? Because it's clearly not just about the kind of book knowledge we get in grad school.
Right. The knowing that.
Exactly. Kagan makes it clear that clinical expertise involves far more than just what we call declarative knowledge. That's the explicit stuff we can state, the facts, the theories, the concepts we can declare and recall.
The stuff you can write down on an exam.
Pretty much. Beyond the declarative, which is obviously vital as a foundation, we get into what's often called procedural knowledge or know-how.
Okay. Know-how, like skills.
Exactly. Think about it like riding a bicycle, or playing a complex piece on an instrument, or even a surgeon performing a delicate operation.
Right, you can read about it forever.
You can read 1,000 books on how to ride a bike, dissect the physics of balance, but you don't truly know how to ride it until you actually get on and do it.
Fall off a few times.
Yeah. Fall off, get back on. It's learned by doing, by repetition, and eventually it becomes this embodied, almost automatic process. It's no longer a series of conscious instructions. It's a fluid, integrated action.
Okay, so how does that translate to therapy?
Well, think about how you've learned to sit with intense, maybe overwhelming emotions in the room. Was that primarily from a textbook on affect regulation?
Probably not primarily.
Or was it from actually doing it, experiencing it, and learning somehow to stay present and centered even when the emotional storm is raging around you? That's procedural knowing in action.
That makes so much sense. It's the difference between knowing about sitting with intense emotion and actually knowing how to do it, feeling it in your body, knowing you can tolerate it.
Precisely. And in the therapy room, so much of what we do, what truly makes a difference, falls squarely into that knowing how category.
But Kagan takes it even deeper, right? He brings in Daniel Stern's concept.
Yes, implicit relational knowing. This is fascinating stuff.
Tell us about that.
It refers to the nonverbal, often non-conscious interactions and patterns that are constantly shaping the therapeutic relationship from moment to moment. It's like the subtle dance of communication that happens beneath the surface of the explicit conversation.
So not the words themselves.
Not the words. It's felt and enacted rather than explicitly discussed or articulated. It's the shared rhythms, the micro-adjustments in posture, the unspoken understanding that can develop between two people.
Kagan emphasizes that this is about the nonverbal, often non-conscious communication, right?
Yes, exactly. It's the way we pick up on subtle shifts in atmosphere, the unspoken dynamics, the almost imperceptible changes in energy that profoundly influence the therapeutic space.
Like when the air suddenly feels thick.
Precisely. Or you get a sudden feeling of spaciousness or increased tension. It's that feeling that something profound is happening in the room that isn't being put into words, but you understand it on a different, more visceral level. And this kind of knowing, whether it's procedural or implicit, is really the bedrock of that spontaneous practice we were talking about. It's incredibly difficult to articulate verbally after the fact, let alone in the moment.
Yeah, try writing that down in your process bits.
Exactly, but it is deeply felt and profoundly enacted, often before our conscious thought even catches up.
So we're talking about these ways of knowing that aren't neatly filed away in our prefrontal cortex, just waiting to be retrieved like a set of bullet points.
Right.
They're in our body, in our gut, in the way we respond almost automatically. And this leads to Kagan's crucial assertion about technique itself.
Yes, that psychoanalytic technique isn't some rigid step-by-step manual. It involves a profound fluidity.
Fluidity, I like that word.
Between conscious, deliberative thought and these unconscious, intuitive responses. It's not an either scenario where you choose one path.
It's a dance.
It's a dynamic, constant dance, a seamless oscillation between these two distinct modes of knowing and being in the room.
That's a profoundly important point, isn't it? It moves us away from maybe older, more rigid ideas like the blank screen therapist.
Absolutely. It emphatically emphasizes the therapist as an active, engaged participant whose own internal processes, their implicit knowing, their unconscious responses, their very presence are an integral and highly influential part of the therapeutic work.
So our inner world matters a lot.
Immensely. This fluidity allows for a much richer, more responsive, and ultimately likely more effective therapeutic process because it allows the therapist to adapt in real time to the constantly unfolding, often unpredictable dynamics of the session.
It makes so much sense when you think about it that way. Because if we only operated from a purely deliberative stance, always filtering everything through explicit theory, meticulously planning every intervention,
We'd be lagging behind.
we'd miss so much. We'd miss what's truly alive and emergent in the room. We'd be a step behind, always trying to catch up to the spontaneous unfolding of the patient's experience.
Whereas this fluidity allows us to be fully present, to adapt, to respond organically to the unique contours of each moment, rather than trying to force it into some preconceived theoretical box.
It's about developing a profound trust, isn't it? Trusting that often the most effective responses will emerge not from forced intellectualization, but from a deeper, more embodied form of understanding that is attuned to the implicit flow of the relationship. It's the art of letting go just enough to truly connect.
Beautifully put. Letting go just enough.
So this idea of fluidity between conscious thought and intuitive response, it really starts to connect with a fundamental concept in clinical practice.
Uh-huh.
How the therapist's inner world itself becomes this powerful therapeutic tool.
Yes.
It shifts the focus profoundly, doesn't it? From just what the therapist does, in terms of technique, to how the therapist is in the room.
Exactly. Kagan's paper makes a powerful argument that the therapist's cultivated inner state, their internal processes, are in themselves crucial therapeutic instruments. This is where that concept of use of self really comes alive.
It moves beyond just a buzzword.
It really does. It becomes a precise, active dimension of the work.
And Kagan highlights some historical concepts that illustrate this point, showing it's not a new idea.
Absolutely. It's woven into the very fabric of psychoanalytic thought. Think about Freud's idea of evenly suspended attention.
Okay.
This isn't a technique in the sense of something you perform, like a specific interpretation. It's a cultivated state of mind, right? An internal positioning where the analyst listens without prejudice, without forcing interpretations.
Letting things emerge.
Letting material emerge organically from the patient's free associations rather than imposing some preconceived framework.
In Winnicott.
Winnicott's profound concept of the holding environment. Again, it's not just about providing a physically safe space, although that's important.
It's more than the comfy chairs.
Much more. It's primarily about the therapist's consistent, reliable presence, their capacity to be with whatever the patient brings without being overwhelmed or retaliating. It's an internal state of mind that can contain the patient's anxieties and facilitate their emotional development.
So these aren't just techniques you deploy.
No. They are deeply cultivated internal states that become an integral part of the therapeutic offering, profoundly shaping the relational field. Your being is the intervention.
And building on that, what about Bayan, his concept of reverie? This one can feel quite abstract, I think, especially for early career therapists.
It really can. Almost mystical sometimes. But it's so vital for understanding how our inner world functions in this non-deliberative way. Kagan talks about reverie as the therapist's unconscious capacity to receive and process the patient's raw, often jumbled emotional material.
Inchoate, is that the word?
Inchoate, yes. Undigested. It's a profound example of non-deliberative internal work. It's not about intellectually analyzing what the patient is saying with your conscious mind in that moment.
So what is it about?
It's about allowing their unspoken distress, their unsymbolized feelings, what Bayan called beta elements, to resonate within you, to be held in your own emotional system, almost like you're dreaming for the patient.
Wow. Yeah.
And this is exactly where Bayan's container-contained model becomes so clear and applicable to those intuitive moments.
Explain that a bit more. Container contained.
The patient, often unconsciously, projects their overwhelming anxieties or unmanageable feelings, these raw beta elements, into the therapist. The therapist, acting as the container, receives these projections through this process of reverie.
Okay, so the therapist takes it in.
It's a largely non-conscious internal process where the therapist tolerates, processes, and in a sense kind of metabolizes these raw emotional states. The idea is that the therapist's emotional capacity transforms these unbearable feelings into something more thinkable, something with meaning, what Bion called alpha elements.
Ah, alpha elements, more digestible.
Exactly, which can then eventually be returned to the patient, maybe through an interpretation or just a shift in presence, in a more digestible symbolic form.
So for you, the listener, sitting with a patient, what does it feel like when their overwhelming, maybe unnameable emotion enters the room?
And you feel yourself taking it in, processing it somehow, making some kind of felt sense of it, even before you have words to articulate it.
That feeling.
That is the profound, non-deliberative work of containment and reverie. It's deeply intuitive, almost like a biological process of emotional digestion happening inside you.
So it's not about intellectually understanding it right then, but feeling it and processing it at a deeper, almost cellular level. This also connects then to how empathy and attunement operate in the room.
Absolutely. While we can consciously try to be empathetic, try to intellectually grasp another's perspective,
Much of it, especially its most impactful forms, is spontaneous, pre-verbal, deeply felt.
yes. Kagan refers to Kohut's concept of empathy here, emphasizing it's not merely an intellectual understanding of the patient's experience.
It's more than just nodding and saying, I understand.
Much more. It's a deep, nonverbal resonance, an effective attunement that helps the patient feel profoundly understood and seen, often without a single word needing to be spoken about it directly. It's that immediate, intuitive mirroring, that felt sense of being with the other person.
It's the crucial difference, isn't it, between saying, I understand what you're saying,
Yeah.
and truly feeling what the other person is experiencing in your own being.
Almost as if their emotional state is momentarily transmitted to you and you find you can bear it, you can hold it.
Yeah.
This is the therapist's use of self in its purest, most profound form, where the internal state, the cultivated capacity for presence, for containing, for resonating, becomes the primary, most impactful therapeutic intervention, often operating way outside the realm of conscious deliberation.
Okay, this is getting really rich. Let's take a moment to bring all of this, the paradox of practice, the different ways of knowing, deliberation versus intuition, the therapist in a world as a tool. Let's bring it into sharper focus with a clinical example.
Good idea. Make it tangible.
Yeah. We're going to meet Maya. She's an early career therapist, just starting to grapple with these very dynamics Kagan is describing, in real time in her sessions.
Okay, Maya.
So Maya is in a session with a patient. Let's call her Sarah. Sarah's been talking about feeling overwhelmed by work pressure. It's a familiar theme. And Maya feels like there's a comfortable flow to the conversation.
Standard enough session so far.
Right. And then, suddenly, Sarah's energy just shifts. She stops mid-sentence, her gaze drops to the floor, her shoulders slumps just slightly, and she withdraws into this thick, almost palpable silence.
Okay. The connection breaks.
Yeah, the connection Maya felt moments ago seems to just vanish. It's replaced by this dense, heavy quiet in the room.
So what happens for Maya internally?
Well, in that immediate moment, Maya feels that familiar, almost reflexive urge to do something, to intervene, break the silence, fix it somehow.
The pressure to act.
Totally. Her internal deliberation kicks in automatically. Based on her training, she might start forming a thoughtful interpretation in her head.
Okay, the deliberation mode activates.
Right. Maybe about Sarah's underlying anxiety, or a pattern of withdrawal linked to early attachment wounds, or maybe even resistance to exploring deeper material. She's mentally rehearsing the words, trying to craft the perfect, insightful intervention that would, re-engage Sarah and explain this sudden shift.
She's picturing herself delivering this well-phrased comment about Sarah's tendency to retreat, working it out intellectually.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But then, something subtle happens inside Maya. It's almost imperceptible. It's not a clear thought. It's not a theoretical deduction, not a diagnostic label.
What is it then?
It's a felt sense in her own body. Maybe a slight tension in her chest, a sudden awareness of the profound stillness in the room, an internal feeling of unease that tells her, almost whispers, wait.
Ah, an implicit signal.
Yeah, a deep intuitive cue that says, hold back, don't speak yet. It completely bypasses her conscious, deliberative plan. It's like this moment of inner spaciousness opens up, almost against her initial intellectual impulse to jump in.
Okay, so this is the critical moment of choice, isn't it? Where the unconscious processes, the implicit knowing, are pushing back against the conscious plan.
Exactly. So instead of delivering the planned, carefully crafted interpretation about Sarah's resistance or anxiety,
Which she had all ready to go.
right, she acts on this intuitive cue, this subtle bodily felt sense. She might shift her posture almost imperceptibly, maybe leaning back just a fraction, softening her facial expression, letting her gaze soften rather than sharpen with analytical focus.
A nonverbal shift first.
Perhaps. And instead of a complex intellectual interpretation, she might simply hold the silence, but with a new quality of presence, a deeper acceptance, or, if words do come,
They're different from the planned ones.
completely different. Exquisitely simple. Almost just mirroring the patient's experience. Something like, it feels like something just got very quiet between us right now. She doesn't analyze. She simply names the felt experience in the room.
Wow, that's powerful in its simplicity.
And this is the key, isn't it? The work in this pivotal moment isn't just about the specific words Maya chose or even the technique she applied from a textbook. It's about the choice itself.
The shift.
The shift from deliberation, from that intellectual planning, to an intuitive, spontaneous response. It's guided not by a theory she consciously applied in that second, but by her use of self, by her attunement to the implicit relational field, to what was unfolding non-verbally and effectively in the room.
It's a moment of non-deliberative being that opens a new pathway.
Exactly. And Sarah may be feeling that simple presence, that direct reflection of the immediate experience rather than an intellectual explanation, might then be able to slowly lift her head, even make eye contact.
And perhaps even begin to articulate the overwhelming feeling she couldn't initially put into words.
Precisely. It's that intuitive pause, that embodied response from Maya, that creates the space for something new to emerge. It allows Sarah to feel truly seen and contained, not just intellectually understood.
This clinical example perfectly illustrates the core tension the paper discusses, doesn't it? The actual therapeutic intervention, the work in that moment, becomes the internal process of the therapist herself.
Maya's internal shift.
It's Maya moving from a cognitive, intellectual processing mode to a more spontaneous, embodied, and implicitly guided response. This is how the internal shift within the therapist moving, you could say, from the prefrontal cortex to a deeper, more visceral knowing directly impacts and shapes the external therapeutic dynamic.
Creating connection.
Creating a profound, often nonverbal connection that facilitates healing. It's really about trusting those subtle shifts within yourself as profound guides.
Powerful, isn't it? It really means trusting those subtle shifts within yourself, those gut feelings that aren't yet fully articulated thoughts or neatly packaged interpretations.
It's a huge validation.
It is. A validation of that often unspoken, almost mysterious part of our clinical experience. And it underscores that becoming an effective therapist isn't just about accumulating more knowledge or mastering more techniques.
Important as those are.
Of course, but it's fundamentally about refining this incredibly delicate, intuitive instrument that is ourselves, allowing it to resonate with the patient's unconscious in these really deep ways.
So if this capacity for spontaneous, effective action, this intuitive know-how, is so crucial.
The natural question is, how on earth do we cultivate it? Because let's be honest, for most of us, this level of expert intuition isn't something we're just born with.
Not usually, no.
It's not just about what you learn in a lecture hall. It's fundamentally about what you experience in the room, and maybe even more importantly, how you integrate that experience.
That's absolutely right. Kagan emphasizes that this expert intuition is developed not primarily through more theoretical study, although that's the foundation.
Right, you need the foundation.
But through repeated, extensive, and often intense exposure to complex, ambiguous clinical situations. It's about building this vast, internalized database of experiences, patterns, subtle cues.
That your unconscious mind can draw upon instantly.
Exactly. Think of a master musician who no longer consciously thinks about each note, but plays with this fluid expressiveness.
Yeah.
Or a seasoned athlete who just intuitively knows where to be on the field.
They've put in the hours.
They've built up an internal library of responses from countless hours of practice and observation. Similarly, a therapist builds this intuitive capacity not just by reading about cases, but by being in the room, session after session.
Witnessing the dance.
Witnessing the nuanced, often nonverbal dance of human interaction, internalizing those patterns until the response becomes almost reflexive, but deeply informed by all that prior experience.
So the role of hands-on experience in the room is truly irreplaceable. You simply learn by doing. But it's not just about doing for doing's sake, is it? It's about doing and then, crucially, reflecting on the doing.
Yes, the reflection piece is key.
It's that cyclical process. Action, observation, thoughtful reflection. That's what truly solidifies this procedural and implicit knowledge, transforming raw experience into refined intuition. You're constantly learning from the feedback loop, of your own actions and the patient's responses.
And this is exactly where supervision becomes not just helpful, but truly indispensable in the development of a therapist.
The supervisory space.
Yes. Supervision is the crucial space for integrating deliberation and practice. It's where you can bring those moments of spontaneous action, those intuitive responses that felt so automatic in the moment.
The Maya moments.
The Maya moments, exactly. And collaboratively with your supervisor, reflect on them. You can ask, what just happened there? Why did I feel compelled to say that simple phrase instead of the complex interpretation I had planned?
Making the implicit more explicit.
Precisely. It helps you understand the underlying processes to bring the implicit into a more explicit awareness. Not necessarily so you can consciously plan it next time, but so you can deepen your understanding of your own unconscious functioning and clinical intuition.
Getting insight into why you did what you did, even if you didn't consciously know it at the time. Refining your internal compass.
Exactly. Refining that internal compass.
And of course, given the psychoanalytic context Kagan is operating within, we simply cannot overlook the profound role of personal analysis, can we?
Absolutely not. It's often implied, if not explicitly stated, as fundamental.
Engaging in your own deep self-exploration, confronting your own unconscious processes, your biases, your blind spots, that directly enhances your capacity for internal processing and use of self, doesn't it?
Without a doubt. It refines your own internal instrument. It makes you a more finely tuned, less reactive, and more genuinely receptive container for whatever comes from the patient.
It builds that internal capacity for reverie and containment that Bion spoke about.
Not just theoretically, but experientially, from the inside out.
Which allows you to trust those subtle shifts within yourself more deeply, maybe because you understand their origins and meanings a bit better.
Yes. It fosters that trust in your own instrument.
What's fascinating here, though, is that while we're talking about cultivating intuition and spontaneous action, Kagan's paper also implicitly warns against the risks of imbalance, right? It's not all about intuition.
Definitely not. There are dangers on both sides. If you are over-deliberating, for instance, constantly trying to apply textbook knowledge,
Always in your head.
you risk being too much in your head. You might miss the immediacy of the moment, become rigid in your approach, or frankly sound like you're reading from a textbook rather than genuinely responding to the living, breathing person in front of you.
Leading to distance.
It can lead to a kind of emotional distance where the patient feels analyzed, maybe even correctly analyzed, but not truly connected with.
And we've all been there, haven't we? Especially early in our careers, perhaps.
Oh, absolutely.
You're so busy trying to formulate the perfect, theoretically informed interpretation, you completely miss the patient's subtle sigh, or the micro-expression of pain, or the raw emotion that's just begging to be witnessed and held, not just analyzed.
It's like trying to navigate a dance floor by constantly reading a map rather than feeling the music and responding to your partner. You'll bump into people.
Exactly. But then, conversely, what's the risk on the other side? Relying solely on pure spontaneity.
Well, if you rely solely on pure spontaneity without sufficient reflection or theoretical grounding, you risk chaotic, unthought-through interventions.
Just reacting.
Just reacting, potentially. Interventions that lack grounding, coherence, or direction. It can feel arbitrary or even overwhelming to the patient. They might feel lost or misunderstood.
Or worse.
Or worse, feel like the therapist is simply acting out their own unexamined, unconscious material onto them.
Which is obviously not therapeutic.
Not at all. So the goal, as the paper suggests, is not to choose one extreme over the other, but to achieve that fluid oscillation.
Perfect fluidity.
Yes. It's a dynamic integration where the therapist can move seamlessly between these modes, from thoughtful planning to intuitive action and back again, always adapting, always responding, guided by the nuanced and ever-changing needs of the moment.
Finding the balance.
Finding the balance and the ability to shift flexibly between them.
So what does this all mean for the big picture? For how we view our profession, maybe particularly psychoanalysis or psychodynamic work?
Well, Kagan's paper really makes an implicit, but I think profoundly powerful argument. Psychoanalysis, and by extension, much of deep psychotherapeutic work, is not just a scientific application of theory.
It's more than applied science.
It's truly an art form, one that requires not only intellectual rigor, but also intuition, genuine presence, and a deep, cultivated feel for the human encounter.
The art and the science.
It's about mastering the science so deeply that it actually frees you to engage fully in the art, to truly be with another human being in their most vulnerable moments, responding authentically and effectively.
It's the ability to hold both, isn't it? The rigorous intellectual framework and the spontaneous, creative, deeply human response in this dynamic tension.
Yes, it's about cultivating a deep, authentic relationship with your own internal world, allowing it to become a finely tuned instrument for healing, understanding, and profound connection. It's like becoming a master craftsman.
Of the human soul. Wow. Okay.
Heavy stuff, but true, I think.
Okay, let's try and unpack this all one last time as we wrap up. We've explored this profound tension and also the necessary integration between conscious deliberation, the thinking, and spontaneous intuitive practice, the doing in the therapeutic room.
Mm-hmm.
We've looked at how early career therapists, maybe many of you listening, often grapple with that palpable gap between what you learn in theory and what actually happens when you sit with the patient.
That feeling of the theory meeting the wall.
Exactly. And we've truly seen, particularly through that striking statistic from the 1977 study, how much the most impactful work often springs from that intuitive know-how place.
Yeah.
The wisdom that resides maybe more in our bones than just in our brains.
And we've seen that true clinical expertise isn't just about accumulating more declarative facts, more book learning, but about embodying knowledge through procedural and implicit knowing. These other ways of understanding.
We explored how the therapist's cultivated internal world, their capacity for things like reverie and containment, becomes a crucial therapeutic tool.
Illustrated so well, I thought, by Maya's intuitive pause and her simple attuned response in her session with Sarah. That shift from deliberation to presence.
And crucially, we understand now that this fluidity, this ability to dance seamlessly between thinking and doing, isn't innate for most of us.
It takes work.
It takes work. It's cultivated through countless hours in the room, through the indispensable insights provided by thoughtful supervision, and often through the deep transformative work of personal analysis of therapy.
It's about finding that sweet spot, that delicate balance between being overly in your head, maybe rigid and analytical, and being purely reactive, ungrounded in theory or reflection.
Okay, so for you, listening right now, here's your challenge. As you go about your week, perhaps reflecting on your own sessions, maybe in your own supervision.
Can you explain the core tension of this paper, this dynamic between thinking and doing, between deliberation and practice in your own words? How would you articulate that dynamic to a colleague, maybe someone even newer to the field than you are?
Try putting it into your own language.
And then take it a step further, make it really personal. What does that tension look like in your own clinical moments? Where have you felt yourself shift from planned thought, from that deliberative internal process, to spontaneous intuitive action?
Can you pinpoint a moment?
Yeah.
Yeah.
What did that feel like in your body, in your mind as that shift occurred? How did you know, even if you couldn't articulate it clearly at the time, that it was time to let go of the plan and simply be?
Really sit with that feeling. And as you mull all of this over, consider this final provocative thought for your own practice.
Cultivating this fluid oscillation, this seamless dance between deliberation and practice. It isn't just about becoming a more effective therapist in terms of outcomes, though hopefully it contributes to that.
Right, it's more than just better technique.
It's also profoundly about becoming more fully present, allowing for a deeper and richer engagement, not only with the patient's unconscious processes, but crucially, with your own.
It's about truly learning to trust the subtle, often unspoken shifts within yourself as profound guides in this intricate, deeply human journey of therapeutic work. Trusting your instrument.